Thank you for watching. This is Amish Skill 5858. I am Ahmed Goodman. I am thankful to all news resources. Following are the news which have been reported by American, Canadian, European, Asian, and African channels, including the news agencies AFP, AP, and Reuters. Now the headlines. Mr. Trump's trial of hush money will start on Monday in New York. America and Israel are on edge due to the imminent threat of Iran. Robert McNeil, co-founder of PBS NewsHour, died. Foreign Surveillance Act in U.S. Congress. Shortage of drinking water in Bogota, Colombia. Biden administration student loan relief. Belgium investigates Russian intervention in European Parliament election. Orenburg, city of Russia under flood waters. Siberia and Tajikistan are also under flood waters. Heavy rainstorm in eastern United States. Now the news in detail.
I'm Jeff Bennett. I'm the Navaz is on assignment. On the NewsHour tonight, Israel
preparing support of these individuals and institutions, and friends of the NewsHour, including Jim and Nancy Bildner, and the Robert and Virginia Schiller Foundation. The Judy and Peter Bloom Kofler Foundation, upholding freedom by strengthening democracies at home and abroad.
On an American Cruise Line's journey along the legendary Mississippi River, travelers explore Civil War battlefields and historic riverside towns. Aboard our fleet of American riverboats, you can experience local culture and cuisine and discover the music and history of the mighty Mississippi. American Cruise Lines, proud sponsor of PBS NewsHour.
The John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, fostering informed and engaged communities. More at kf.org.
Certified financial planner professionals are proud to support PBS NewsHour. CFP professionals are committed to acting in their client's best interest. More information at letsmakeaplan.org. And with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. And friends of the NewsHour. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the NewsHour. We begin with some news of our own tonight. Robert McNeil, co-founder and longtime co-anchor of this program, passed away earlier today at the age of 93. McNeil, known by friends and colleagues as Robin, co-founded the McNeil-Lehrer Report, the predecessor of the PBS NewsHour, alongside the late Jim Lehrer in 1975. We'll have a remembrance and a conversation about his life and many contributions later in the program. But first, as we know, Robin would have insisted, the news. Warning signs are flashing red throughout the Middle East and beyond tonight, as Israel and the U.S. await a possible Iranian response to the attack on its consulate last week in Damascus, Syria. That Israeli airstrike killed one of Iran's senior military leaders, and the Islamic Republic has vowed vengeance. Following it all is Nick Schifrin, who joins us now. It's good to see you, Nick. So how great is the concern, and what exactly are the U.S. and Israel bracing for?
A senior administration official tells me tonight that the concern is, quote, very high. U.S. and Israeli officials are preparing for strikes by Iran and Iran's proxies inside Israel. And Iran, Jeff, has never attacked Israel with kinetic weapons before. One U.S. official tells me the attack is likely to be, quote, bigger than usual. Another U.S. official tells me the timing of the attack could be, quote, by the end of the weekend. But I will say that another official from a different branch of government is telling me that the assessment is more that Iranian proxies by themselves would attack Israel or its assets in the region. And so clearly there are ongoing assessments of what could happen. But all the officials agree that the most likely scenario we're talking about is Iranian missiles or Iranian-made missiles and drones attacking inside Israel and or attacks on Israel outside of Israel property. And to show how seriously Iran goes, and of course how Israel responds to what Iran does.
We will wait and we will watch. Nick Schifrin, thanks to you for that great reporting.
Thank you.
Hi, Vanessa Ruiz in for Stephanie Tsai with NewsHour West. Here are the latest headlines. House lawmakers have approved the reauthorization of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, or FISA, for 2 years. Today's vote comes after an earlier version of the bill that called for a 5-year extension failed in the House. But the measure won't head to the Senate for approval just yet. Opponents scheduled a reconsideration vote next week. The surveillance program is scheduled to expire on April 19th. The Biden administration announced a new wave of student loan cancellations today. They are forgiving $7.4 billion in debt for 277,000 more borrowers. The administration has now provided loan relief to 4.3 million people, totaling more than $150 billion in aid. Last year, the Supreme Court blocked the president's broader debt cancellation plan, saying he lacked the authority to do so without congressional approval. Officials in Belgium are looking into whether Russia is meddling in upcoming European Parliament elections. Authorities say that Russian agents in Brussels are promoting pro-Moscow candidates to try to undermine the EU's support for Ukraine. They've allegedly even tried to bribe some lawmakers. Belgium's prime minister announced the probe today.
Belgian intelligence services have confirmed the existence of pro-Russian interference networks with activities in several European countries and also here in Belgium. The goal is very clear. A weakened European support for Ukraine serves Russia on the battlefield.
Russian authorities have repeatedly denied the accusations. The Europe-wide elections are slated for June. In Russia, authorities in the city of Orenburg ordered thousands more residents to evacuate today as floodwaters rise even higher. The deluge started last week when the Ural River burst through a dam. The water level is more than 6 feet above what is deemed safe. 360 additional homes were flooded overnight. Some residents have come back to survey the damage.
This is how high the water level got over the last 3 days. We never expected it to rise so high. We lifted all the furniture up, the chairs, but as you can see, it's all floating now. Everything we've worked for is gone.
In total, more than 120,000 people have been forced to evacuate their homes in Russia's Ural Mountains, Siberia, and Kazakhstan. Back in this country, the National Weather Service has issued flood warnings for parts of the Northeast as severe weather makes its way through the region. Storms had already knocked out power for thousands in the Virginias and southeastern New York. Overnight, heavy rains brought flash floods to West Virginia. Today, streets in Washington County, Pennsylvania were underwater. And in Texas, one person has died and 13 others are injured after a driver intentionally drove a semi-trailer truck into a public safety office. The 18-wheeler left a hole in the side of the building in Brenham, Texas, about 75 miles west of Houston. The driver was taken into custody. Authorities say the 42-year-old renewal for a commercial driver's license had been rejected at the facility. Former U.S. diplomat Manuel Rocha was sentenced today to 15 years in federal prison for acting as a secret agent for Cuba. His spying for the communist country went undetected for decades. Federal investigators say a damage assessment will take years to complete. Many details of the case remain classified. A federal judge today denied efforts to dismiss Hunter Biden's federal gun case. Biden's lawyers had argued he is being prosecuted for political purposes. Prosecutors allege Biden lied about his drug use on a form required to buy a gun. The former interpreter for baseball player Shohei Ohtani made his first court appearance today for allegedly stealing millions of dollars from Ohtani to cover gambling debts. Ipe Mitsuhara surrendered to federal authorities earlier in the day. The judge ordered Mitsuhara to undergo treatment for gambling addiction before releasing him on bond. And on Wall Street today, stocks closed sharply lower to end the week amid ongoing inflation worries. The Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped 475 points to close below 38,000. The Nasdaq lost 267 points. The S&P 500 gave back 75. So to come on the NewsHour, David Brooks and Ruth Marcus weigh in on this week's political headlines. And we remember our co-founder and longtime co-anchor, Robert McNeil.
This is the PBS NewsHour from WETA Studios in Washington and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
On Monday, for the first time in American history, a former president will be tried in a court of law. It follows the judge in Donald Trump's New York hush money trial, again denying his request for a delay. Mr. Trump is charged with 34 counts of falsifying business records to prevent news of an alleged extramarital affair from becoming public. William Brangham has a preview of this complicated and historic case.
We will make America great again.
8 years ago, Donald Trump, the real estate mogul turned reality TV star turned presidential candidate, was about to deliver a titanic political upset. It was the fall of 2016, and despite trailing in the polls to former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, the Republican nominee was agencies, knowledge of the case, and whether they're able to render fair judgment in this historic, first-of-its-kind trial. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm William Brangham.
Sadly, tonight we remember our co-founder and longtime co-anchor Robert McNeil. His partnership with his close friend Jim Lehrer, who died in 2020, led to the creation of this program you're watching today. McNeil died early this morning at the age of 93. Jeffrey Brown looks back at his life and many contributions.
What actions or deeds are you prepared to make to improve relations between Cuba and the United States?
Robert McNeil had a knack for being where the action was. He covered major stories around the world and titled his 1982 memoir, The Right Place at the Right Time.
I am a wordsmith. That is my trade, is using words, either writing them or speaking them.
He was a lifelong lover of language, literature, and the arts, who called himself in a later memoir, Wordstruck. And he was the visionary and driving force in the creation
Connections to Robert McNeil. We appreciate it. And as we mourn his loss, we invite you to share your memories of Robert McNeil on our website. That's pbs.org/newshour. And we're going to shift our focus now to a busy week in politics as a major abortion decision out of Arizona weighs on the minds of some voters, and Republicans on Capitol Hill navigate their agenda with influence from Donald Trump. For more, we're joined tonight by New York Times columnist David Brooks and Ruth Marcus, associate editor for the Washington Post. Thank you both for being here. So Vice President Kamala Harris is in Arizona tonight highlighting reproductive rights just days after that state Supreme Court ruled that a near total abortion ban.
If he's convicted, a significant sense, chunks say I will not vote for him. I'll believe what I see.
All right, David Brooks and Ruth Marcus, appreciate you both. Remember, there's much more online, including a roundup of this week's political headlines on our weekly digital show that's on our YouTube page. And be sure to tune into Washington Week with The Atlantic tonight for analysis of how abortion politics is dominating the 2024 election cycle and how Republicans are navigating this week's Arizona Supreme Court ruling. And on PBS News Weekend, as the world's top golfers tee off at the Masters, a look back at the first African-American golfer to play on the PGA Tour. And that is the NewsHour for tonight. I'm Jeff Bennett. For all of us here at the PBS NewsHour, actually, let's let Robin and Jim do it.
Hey, Robin, I guess that's it.
Yeah, hey.
Actuality.
Iran threatens retaliation against Israel for an airstrike on its Damascus consulate. The US pledges to support its ally, President Joe Biden telling Tehran simply, don't. Fierce fighting and bombardments claim still more lives in the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, a TRT journalist who was badly injured said he was targeted despite being clearly identifiable as a member of the press. The Belgian Prime Minister announces an investigation into Russian interference in the upcoming European parliamentary elections. His intelligence services find a network that was trying to push pro-Kremlin candidates ahead and undermine European support for Ukraine. You're watching France 24, I'm Alexander Wilcock. On the 7th month of the war in Gaza, fears are growing that Iran could launch attacks against Israel. Tehran has threatened to retaliate after an alleged Israeli airstrike hit its diplomatic compound in the Syrian capital, killing senior commanders of the Revolutionary Guard. The United States has pledged to stand fully behind Israel against Iran.
Allies of Israel are on high alert. Nobody is willing to call Iran's bluff. Even the US president has made no secret of expectations of an imminent retaliatory attack.
Expectations sooner than later.
His message to Iran:
Don't.
Biden also reiterated his support of Israel as his teams continue to monitor the situation. In the event of such an attack, Israel says it's ready.
Our defenses are ready, and we know how to deal with each threat separately. As well as defense, we are prepared to attack. We are ready to attack with a range of capabilities, and we know how to act and protect the people of Israel.
Iran has so far refrained from taking any direct action against Israel since the start of the war in Gaza. Tensions flared following a strike on the Iranian consulate in Damascus on April 1st, which killed 16 people, including 7 members of Iran's Revolutionary Guards. Tehran believes it was committed by the Israeli forces with the US involved and has warned of retaliation.
The evil regime made a mistake. In this regard, it must and will be punished. When they attacked our consulate, they attacked our territory.
Since those threats, countries including France, Germany, India and Russia have warned their citizens not to travel to the region.
Now, the Israeli army announced it has allowed in an undisclosed number of aid trucks into the north of the territory through a newly opened border crossing. Despite pledges from Israel to flood Gaza with aid, the UN says more needs to be done. It says the deliveries are not being felt because of persistent distribution difficulties inside the territory. Meanwhile, heavy gunfire and bombardments have continued to be reported in Gaza as the death toll surged past 33,600, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. It says the victims have been mostly women and children, while the UN and CPJ have respectively reported over 200 aid workers killed, along with almost 100 members of the press.
A man is rushed to hospital. He's wearing a press jacket, and part of his right leg is missing.
We were filming when we were targeted by a strike. I don't know if it was a missile or a tank. I was wearing my press gear with a helmet. It was clear, even for a blind person, that I was a journalist.
It's the result of a day of deadly Israeli raids on central and northern Gaza. Residents of the Nuseirat refugee camp say dozens were killed or wounded in air and ground assaults. Further north in Gaza City, the Hamas-run health ministry also says 25 members of a family were killed in an airstrike that hit their home.
We were asleep when the people suddenly started coming out of the building because a missile had struck. We didn't hear the missile or anything. We were all sleeping. I came to find my sister, her sons, and her daughters. All were killed. All I found was their remains.
The fighting is also taking place outside of Gaza. Early on Friday, 2 Palestinians were killed in confrontations with Israeli forces in the occupied West Bank. Hamas says one of those killed was a local commander. According to Israel, Mohammed Omar Daragme, carried here as a martyr during his funeral, had been planning attacks against Israel for the past few months.
We're staying with the West Bank, where another Palestinian man was killed, more than 2 dozen others wounded, when dozens of Israeli settlers stormed a village, searching for a missing teenager, shooting and setting fires as they went. The Israeli army said they moved the settlers on and were themselves searching for the 14-year-old boy. They opened fire when Palestinians began throwing stones at them. Rights groups have long accused the military of failing to halt settler violence or punish soldiers for wrongdoing. Moving on now to other world news, and United Nations officials are warning the humanitarian crisis triggered by the conflict in Sudan is set to worsen dramatically in the coming months and could tip some regions into famine. But the conflict, which is about to enter its second year, is showing no signs of abating. Ron Berstecker reports.
A long queue has formed outside this makeshift clinic in northern Darfur. This young woman came here after being turned away from hospital, but she couldn't make it in time.
I couldn't afford to take my children to hospital, and the pharmacy was asking too much money. My first child died on the way back home, and my second child passed away 6 days later.
1 year into a bloody civil war, the situation in Sudan is more critical than ever. More than 8 million people have been displaced by the conflict, and 18 million are facing acute food insecurity. Most of the country's infrastructure has been destroyed, the economy has collapsed, and food and medicine are lacking. There have also been reports of extrajudicial killings, rape, and sexual violence in what's now being described as the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. Yet international actors, who have been ringing the alarm bell for months, warn the situation could be about to get much worse.
Time is running out. Without a stop to the fighting and unhindered access to the delivery of humanitarian aid, Sudan's crisis will dramatically worsen in the months to come and could impact the whole region. We are only seeing the tip of the iceberg, and the situation could be much more dire in reality.
Humanitarian organizations say more funding is urgently needed, with only 6% of the resources required to address the crisis having been raised so far. They're also calling on the warring sides to open up humanitarian corridors and allow unimpeded access to aid.
Next, US President Joe Biden has reiterated his nation's steadfast commitment to defend the Philippines amid increasingly provocative actions by Beijing in the South China Sea. The statement came after a trilateral summit involving top officials from both of those nations as well as Japan. China has defended its actions, saying it has undisputable sovereignty over the areas in question. The Belgian Prime Minister has announced a probe into suspected Russian interference in upcoming European parliamentary elections. Alexander De Croo said his intelligence services have confirmed the existence of a network that's trying to get pro-Kremlin candidates elected and undermine European support for Ukraine.
Prime Minister Alexander De Croo announced Friday that Belgium is launching an inquiry into how Russian money is being used to alter the makeup of the European Parliament.
According to our intelligence service, the objectives of Moscow are very clear. The objective is to help elect more pro-Russian candidates to the European Parliament and to reinforce a certain pro-Russian narrative in that institution.
Belgium's investigation comes 2 weeks after the Czech government announced that it had broken up a pro-Kremlin network. According to Czech and Polish intelligence services, the network operated the popular Voice of Europe news website, through which it had funneled hundreds of thousands of euros to politicians across Europe. De Croo said the Belgian judiciary had begun a prosecution over such interference in Belgium, but did not give the names of anyone suspected of receiving money. The allegations of Russian bribery sparked anger at a European Parliament debate this week.
I'm outraged to hear that members of this House and European candidates have been paid by the Russian government and its intermediaries, paid to spread Kremlin propaganda. This is treason. Treason by hypocritical members of parliament and candidates who secretly do not desire to act in favor of Europeans.
Western nations have repeatedly accused Russian operatives of using the internet to spread false information. Russian authorities, however, have denied such activities.
Donald Trump has... we're going to take a brief look at some of the other stories making world headlines. Donald Trump has confirmed he'll take the stand during his hash money trial beginning on Monday, making history as the first former US president to face criminal charges. Trump's lawyers tried to delay it, arguing the huge media coverage twinned with Manhattan being overwhelmingly Democrat-leaning would make it impossible to find a fair jury. Federal judges refused to dismiss gun charges against President Biden's son Hunter, one of 2 criminal cases against him. He'd asked to strike out 2 counts of lying about his use of illegal narcotics when he purchased a handgun in 2018, and the 3rd count of illegally possessing that weapon. He's the first child of a sitting president to be indicted, faces up to 20 years if found guilty. Ecuador's former Vice President Jorge Glass has said he'll appeal a tribunal's ruling that he must remain in jail despite judges finding his arrest was illegal. Glass, twice convicted of corruption and now facing further charges, was detained last week when Ecuadorian forces broke with international norms and stormed the Mexican embassy where he'd sought refuge. And Haiti's taken a significant step towards restoring security in a crisis-hit country, formalising the creation of a transitional presidential council after long delays. It comes after Prime Minister Ariel Henry announced he's stepping down. He's been stuck overseas since armed gangs took control of most of the capital. And next to the Colombian capital, which has imposed water rationing due to a severe drought, some 10 million Bogota residents are being asked to take fewer showers, lessen their laundry loads, and let their cars remain dirty. Gabrielle Caution joined us earlier from our Bogota bureau.
Everything changed with the El Niño phenomenon last June, when it practically stopped raining, at least not enough to fill the reservoirs that supply the city with drinking water. Bogota depends on 8 reservoirs, which are artificial lakes located in the mountains surrounding the city. The 2 main ones, which supply 70% of Bogota's drinking water, are at extremely low levels. They have only 16% of their capacity left. The mayor's office estimates that Bogota could run dry at the beginning of June, and to avoid a general water cut, it has imposed temporary water cuts for 24 hours in different parts of the city successively, but it has so far had a limited impact since water consumption fell by only 2 cubic meters per second, and that's just not enough to deal with the decline in reserves. Additionally, the city is calling for citizen participation and shared some recommendations, such as taking a shower in less than 5 minutes, brushing your teeth using a single glass of water, or collect the cold water from the shower while it heats up. Many small actions that seems minimal and show just how unprepared the Colombian capital is for climate change and its consequences.
Now, police near Oxford in the UK were left scratching their heads when they heard a siren coming from a mysterious location with nothing to do with their cars parked nearby. Upon further investigation, they found the culprit, a male blackbird that incorporated the sound into its mating call. Let's take a listen. Now, luckily, it was a blackbird calling for others and not a crow, otherwise they might have got him for attempted murder. On that, we'll end this edition. Stay tuned for more world news on France 24.
Hello and welcome on board. You're watching Eye on Africa. First, the headlines. Russian media
is Asia Now.
It's 11 a.m. in Singapore and Hong Kong, 8:30 in New Delhi and 10 o'clock in Jakarta. I'm Ilakya Selpanashi at this hour. What is your private to Iran in this moment?
Don't.
US President Joe Biden warns Iran against attacking Israel as concerns grow over a widening conflict in the Middle East. US officials say China is supporting Russia's war effort in Ukraine by providing drone and missile technology to Moscow. China denies involvement in Ukraine and providing weaponry to any party. And Thailand's top diplomat says the nation will not tolerate border violations. Thai soldiers are on high alert as clashes continue between Myanmar's military and rebel forces over the key border town of Myawaddy. Israel is bracing for a possible attack from Iran, with the White House saying that the threat remains, and I quote, real and viable. President Joe Biden has warned Tehran not to strike, but added that he expected the attack would come in the short term. Evidence nuclear attack on Israel is from Iran, Mr. President.
I want to get a situation, but my expectation sooner than later.
Mr. President to Iran in this moment.
Don't.
A Wall Street Journal report says the U.S. is boosting its presence in the Middle East, and it cites U.S. officials saying that Washington is repositioning 2 destroyers, and at least one of the vessels carry a sophisticated missile defense system. The U.S.'s Central Command Chief is in Israel and met with Israel's defense minister and its army chief yesterday to assess preparations in light of the Iranian threat. Israel, which has paused leave for combat units, says it is prepared for both defensive and offensive actions.
ברמה האחרונה קיימנו בצה"ל הערכת מצב ואישורי תוכניות למגוון תרחישים, בהמשך לדיווחים והצהרות על תקיפה איראנית. מפקדי האגפים והזרועות הציגו לרמטכ"ל את ההיערכות בהגנה ובהתקפה, והתאמת המענה המבצעי בכלל הגזרות.
Now, Tehran blames Israel for the attack on its diplomatic compound in Damascus on 1st of April, which killed 7 members of its elite revolutionary guards. Israel has not claimed responsibility for the airstrike, but Iran's supreme leader said earlier this week that Israel must be punished. However, there are also reports saying Tehran has signaled to Washington that it wants to avoid escalation. The heightened tensions have prompted multiple countries, including France, Russia, and India, to issue advisories. Germany and Austria have asked their citizens to leave Iran. Lufthansa and Austrian airlines have paused their flights to and from Tehran, while reports say Qantas has adjusted its non-stop flight from Perth to London to avoid Iranian airspace. Now, Israel says the first aid trucks have entered Gaza through a newly opened northern crossing. The move comes after calls from foreign governments and NGOs urging Israel to allow for more aid into northern Gaza, where the humanitarian crisis is at its most severe. The IDF released a video purportedly showing first aid trucks entering through the new crossing, but it stopped short of revealing how many trucks crossed into Gaza or the exact location of the new crossing. It added that the trucks were inspected at the Kerem Shalom crossing point on the border with Egypt and were accompanied by soldiers. For the US, one of Israel's staunch allies, says the country is meeting its aid commitments. However, more still needs to be done. And critics, though, have accused Israel of deliberately blocking aid from being delivered to hunger-stricken enclave. Israel has also yet to make good on its word to reopen the Erez crossing after saying it would do so last week. Alex Collier in Tel Aviv with more on the implications of Israel's planned assault on Rafah.
It really depends on what kind of plan is implemented. Now, if it had been a full-scale military operation in Rafah without the evacuation of civilians that the US and other allies have pushed for so consistently, you could have seen mass casualties. You could have seen mass civilian casualties in Rafah. We know that 1.4 million Palestinians are there. The vast majority of those are displaced from the rest of the Gaza Strip because the Israeli Defense Forces had previously said that it was a safe zone and people could return there. Now, we know that Israeli forces have pulled out of central Gaza, encouraging people to return to those areas, for example, in the city of Khan Yunis. But again, what they're finding when they return are completely ruined streets, completely ruined buildings. We've heard the WHO saying that the health infrastructure is completely broken and that unexplained.
Thai government. We should sit down together and try to build up this peace corridor.
Conducted without major loss of life and humanitarian suffering.
Well, a group of Myanmar military troops that retreated to a bridge along the Thai border has reportedly been attacked by drones flown by rebel groups, and this comes after resistance forces claimed control of Myawaddy, a strategic border town. Thailand is urging Myanmar to avoid further violence. Mei Wong has more.
Thailand's foreign minister says the kingdom stands ready to broker in a dialogue to help resolve the Myanmar coup crisis if the time is right. Mr. Panpri Pahithanukon says Thailand has and continues to communicate with the Myanmar military coup regime to urge them not to launch further retaliation in order to recapture the border town of Myawaddy just across from Thailand over here. The ethnic army and resistance forces captured the border town of Myawaddy on Wednesday after a month-long intensified clashes with the coup regime. At a news conference after visiting Mesot city bordering Myanmar on Friday to observe the situation after next-door Myawaddy was taken over by ethnic army and resistance forces, Thailand Foreign Minister Panpri Pahithanukon says ASEAN too has been and will continue to urge Myanmar military to desist from escalating the violence. Many are concerned the coup regime will launch brutal air attacks against the resistance forces in Myawaddy. Thailand says they're watching the developments closely and will respond either by air or land if the Myanmar violence spills over, crossing into Thai space.
ความสงบเกิดขึ้นในเมียวดีนะครับไม่ใช่เพราะว่าเรามีการค้าขายเดียวนะครับเป็นประเทศเพื่อนบ้านเราก็ไม่ประสงค์ที่จะให้มีความรุนแรงเกิดขึ้นแล้วก็ถ้าสามารถที่จะควบคุมได้เนี่ยในกลุ่มเขาเป็นเองเนี่ยเราก็จะมีความดีมากเพราะถ้าเราจะให้เราเป็นคนกลางเนี่ยเราก็พร้อมเวลานี้ทางฝั่งเมียนมาเนี่ยก็อยู่ความไม่แน่นอนอยู่ชัดเจนเราได้ส่งคนไปควบคุมเขาแล้วนะครับแล้วก็ณวันนี้เนี่ยสถานการณ์เนี่ยเขาบอกว่ามันจะไม่มีการตอบโต้อะไรที่รุนแรงถ้ามันรุนแรงไปกว่าเพราะว่าเขาสามารถที่จะรุนแรงได้ทุกเพราะฉะนั้นผมคิดว่ามันเป็นช่วงที่จะ
However, an opposition member of parliament believes Thailand can do more. Kanawi Subsang says Thailand should consider changing its strategy as a next-door neighbor in handling the Myanmar crisis.
Thailand needs to step up. It paradigm of thinking that Thailand should not interfere into the internal affairs, because Myanmar is here, Thailand is here, we cannot run away from each other. So we have to step up, we have to go beyond the paradigm that we're having into our foreign policy. We need to do some kind of the interventions in terms of the, what we call the, I can say the soft intervention. We should not just go for the hard intervention. We should identify some places for them for negotiation, or either we can establish peace among the neighboring country of Myanmar. So we need to consider talking with Bangladesh, Indian, Chinese, Laotian and Thai government. We should sit down together and try to build up this peace corridor for Myanmar.
Thailand is preparing for some 100,000 potential new refugees from Myanmar if violence picks up. It'll house them in a temporary site and provide them with humanitarian assistance. Thailand says it'll also provide temporary shelter to coup regime soldiers who fled the border town of Myawaddy purely on humanitarian grounds. The Myanmar military coup has been going on for more than 3 years now, and Thailand wants to see peace and stability return to Myanmar. May Wong, CNA, Mesot, Thailand.
And coming up on Asia now, the Philippines vows to fight for its rights in the South China Sea following a show of support from the US and Japan.
Amid a global push to pivot away from fossil fuels, countries in the Gulf have found opportunity in economic diversity.
They put their oil money into good use, investments using oil revenues.
To develop new engines of growth, the Gulf states have gone all out to attract the right talent to help build new capabilities.
We take home pay precisely like how much they put in the job offer.
你就有很大的这种自由度，你可以为自己工作，可以创建自己的 business， 然后不需要再跟任何一个雇主进行强绑定。
我们有自己的经验，我们也怎么处理东西。如果产量大了，对我们来说肯定是经济效益也会同步增长。
What's life like for those who've answered the call of the Gulf? Gulf Falcons, premiering Tuesday, April 23rd on CNA.
Big changes coming to home loans in Singapore. What are your options to save money on your mortgage?
Rising demand and lower supply. What's next for Bitcoin? Plus setting financial goals before hitting the big 4-0.
If you didn't start earlier, you might have to make some adjustments.
Tonight on CNA.
Today's our collection day. How many people are going to come to your house today to collect?
About 80.
Group buy, a popular way to banding together. Buy in bulk and save.
This juice is from Finland. This is from Batam.
You bought a lot of items from group buy to furnish your home.
I have saved over 3,000.
Tonight, sales pitch, the Prime Minister's new plan aimed at taking on the housing crisis.
Canadians need homes they can afford.
The urgent need.
We are losing a lot of low-income housing.
And the politics behind the new pledge. A stranded whale thwarts a delicate rescue mission.
We're able to get her real close, but she's catching on to us.
Plus, Canadians told to avoid travel to Israel over fears of an Iranian attack.
It's hard to predict what they'll do.
Also, the multi-million-dollar robbery that may have ties to a major crime syndicate. And long walks on the beach with a llama.
It's just their little quirky faces. They're just so different. They're extremely smart.
The unexpected draw bringing tourists to New Brunswick.
CTV National News with Heather Butts.
Good evening. The Prime Minister is making a massive push to try and draw in young voters and convince Canadians of a plan for one of the country's biggest problems, housing. It comes just days before the Liberals reveal the latest budget and is being touted as the most comprehensive and ambitious housing announcement ever seen in the country. CTV's Annie Bertrand-Oliver takes us through the details.
Liberal cabinet ministers fanned out across the country to pitch their plan to tackle the housing crisis. 28 pages of promises the government calls the most comprehensive and ambitious housing plan ever.
Canadians need homes they can afford. This is one of the most urgent issues that people are facing.
Among the new promises, Ottawa is giving tax breaks to developers who build rental units and to colleges who build new student housing. It's offering $40,000 in low-interest loans to homeowners who build a rental suite, and spending $150 million to grow the number of tradespeople, while also offering more than $1 billion to reduce homelessness.
It is a bit mixed bag. Some of the changes on the tax side, could be done at the stroke of a pen. Other things are going to take a year or two or more in order to get into action.
To restore affordability by 2030, the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation says an extra 3.5 million homes need to be built. This plan aims to create a total of 3.9 million homes by 2031. But getting there requires the provinces to buy in.
Right now, it's a 6-7-story office building.
Housing advocate Mark Richardson hopes many of those units will be created from unused government office buildings like this one in Toronto.
This is an example where the city's been doing all the right things. There hasn't always been the federal commitment to bring the kind of money to the table in affordable housing loans and grants that make a project like this viable.
And while experts say the plan doesn't do much to increase the supply of homes for sale, rental advocates are desperate for solutions for the lowest income renters.
We are losing a lot of housing, low-income housing, where the builder comes, buy these low-income homes, they crush them, and then evict the people.
The government is also promising a historic shift in how public lands are used to build new homes. They're also pledging to make it easier to build rental units near colleges and public transit, an idea the Conservative leader Heather has been pushing.
CTV's Annie Bertrand-Oliver in Ottawa. Some unusual moments at that housing announcement today, with the Prime Minister and members of his cabinet repeatedly pausing to tend to matters on their phones. They were voting remotely in a parliamentary session in the House of Commons relating to more than 200 Conservative amendments to the government's jobs bill. The head of CSIS was called back today to testify for the second time at the inquiry into foreign interference, questioned about specific findings in briefing notes tabled before the commission. CTV's Jeremy Sharon was listening in. Jeremy, what has changed?
Heather, we learned a few key things from David Vigneault's testimony today, including that he stands by the conclusions in a series of briefing notes presented to the inquiry. Those notes had not yet been tabled when Vigneault last testified, and so today he faced fresh questions about those documents and their findings, including that China did interfere in the 2019 and 2021 elections.
We saw foreign interference during those elections, and that interference was indeed clandestine and deceptive. And at the same time, that interference did not amount to have an impact on the integrity of the election.
Now, another memo from 2022 concluded that until Canada views foreign interference as an existential threat to Canadian democracy and respond to it, the threats will persist. Now, Wednesday, testimony from the Prime Minister and his senior advisors revealed that some of the information in these documents was not shared with them. Today, Vigneault clarified, while the briefing notes were prepared for meetings he had with the Prime Minister, much of the contents were not passed along.
I bring my briefing material and I bring my obvious gates because you have to be able to be very agile on dealing with any issues that the person you're briefing wants to raise with you.
He says the briefings often focused on specific incidents of potential foreign interference. Today's testimony from the head of CSIS wrapped up the first round of public hearings in this inquiry. The Commission is now expected to deliver a preliminary report by May 3rd, and a second round of public hearings will be held this fall. Heather?
Jeremy Sharon reporting from Ottawa. A former Canadian Space Agency engineer has been acquitted of breach of trust. The RCMP accused Wan Ping-jung of using his position to act on behalf of a Chinese aerospace firm while employed by the federal agency. A Quebec judge cleared him, saying it warranted disciplinary measures, but the Crown failed to prove he committed a crime. The mission to move a baby killer whale on the west coast of Vancouver Island is on hold tonight. The orca has been trapped for more than 2 weeks in a lagoon. A rescue effort today wasn't successful. CTV's Andrew Johnson with what went wrong and what's next.
This isn't how the first attempt at a rescue 3 weeks in the making was supposed to end. Boats being pulled back out of the water with a young whale still stranded nearby.
Today was unfortunately did not work.
Dozens of people were part of the near 8-hour-long effort today in a remote lagoon on western Vancouver Island. Among them, some of the world's leading marine mammal experts. But the 2-year-old orca they were trying to coax into shallow water wasn't having any of it.
This animal was extremely smart and learning very quickly, so we really only have had a few chances at this, and the animal's adapted. So we're looking at alternatives going forward, and we're able to get her real close, but she's catching on to us.
The plan was to get the orphaned orca into a sling to hoist her out of the water and onto a truck. Then the whale would be released back out into open water, hopefully near her family pod.
It definitely is the most difficult and complicated rescue that I've been a part of.
The calf and her pregnant mother swam into the isolated area, not realizing how difficult it would be to get out. The mother became trapped on a rocky beach and died. The young whale unlikely to survive for long on her own. But today's failed relocation attempt is a positive sign in terms of her condition.
The animal's still very active, appears healthy, so it's that makes it difficult, but it's also very good news.
Now the team being led by the Hatteras First Nation and Fisheries and Oceans Canada will regroup and put together a plan B to figure out a capture in deeper water.
The team's still optimistic, and we're all going to work together to make this work. We're not giving up.
Coming up with that new plan is going to take time. The team expects to be brainstorming through the weekend before gathering the new equipment necessary to give this another shot next week. All the while keeping tabs on the health of that little whale who proved today she isn't quite ready to cooperate. Andrew Johnson, CTV News, Zabalis, BC. The former chief of police for Thunder Bay in Northern Ontario is facing charges tonight. Sylvia Huth has been charged with 2 counts of obstructing justice, 1 count of breach of trust and obstruction. It's part of an ongoing misconduct probe after reports found investigations into the sudden deaths of Indigenous people by the Thunder Bay police were tainted by racism and stereotyping. A Toronto police officer was stabbed and a suspect shot during a violent altercation this afternoon.
Our officer remains in hospital and is in stable condition at this time. The suspect is also in stable condition in hospital.
Video captured on security camera shows a tense standoff in a parking lot before an officer shot their gun. The 22-year-old officer is being treated for a stab wound in his leg. He is the 4th officer injured on the job in 2 weeks. Overseas now, Israel is on high alert, bracing for Iran to retaliate for an Israeli airstrike on a consulate in Syria. The U.S. is moving more troops and ships to the Middle East, and it comes with a warning from President Joe Biden. This as the Canadian government is now advising against all travel to Israel. CTV's Heather Wright reports.
Dozens of rockets seen here on surveillance video were fired from Hezbollah-controlled southern Lebanon today into northern Israel. Most of them were intercepted by the Iron Dome, but the country is on high alert, anticipating an attack by Iran or one of its proxies.
My expectation sooner than later.
Today, U.S. President Joe Biden was asked about the expected strike, retaliation for the Israeli bombing in Syria that killed several senior Iranian commanders. His warning to Iran was concise, as he reiterated U.S. support for Israel.
We are devoted to the defense of Israel. We will support Israel, we will help defend Israel, and Iran will not succeed.
The United States has dispatched the head of U.S. Central Command to Israel to coordinate a possible response, which could include intercepting missiles.
This should deter Iran, but that assumes that the Iranian leadership is reasonable, and that is something of a gamble.
Tehran has publicly and repeatedly vowed revenge for the April 1st strike, though reportedly wants to avoid a serious escalation in the region. Since the war between Israel and Hamas began in October, Iran has used its proxies, Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the Houthis in Yemen, to attack Israel and its allies, including U.S. troops. More recently, Iran has been smuggling weapons into the West Bank. But despite these clashes, leaders from both Iran and the U.S. have maintained they want to avoid an all-out war.
It's hard to predict what they'll do. It serves their interests to maintain a certain impression of unpredictability.
Today, Global Affairs Canada issued a new travel advisory for Israel, urging Canadians to avoid all travel due to the heightened risk of attack. Many other countries have issued similar advisories in recent days. Heather.
CTV's Heather Wright in Toronto. Arizona is the latest battleground over abortion rights after the state Supreme Court restored a Civil War-era ban. Vice President Kamala Harris was there today as Republicans and Democrats mobilized to fight back. Here's CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malvin.
If Donald Trump gets back in power,
President Joe Biden and the Democrats are seizing on abortion rights, ramping up with new aggressive ads.
your body and your decisions belong to you, not the government, not Donald Trump. I will fight like hell to get your freedom back.
That freedom was stripped away in Arizona when the High Court reinstated an 1864 law banning nearly all abortions, the only exception to save the mother's life. The shocking ruling is causing chaos and confusion. Billboards are up blaming Donald Trump. Vice President Kamala Harris traveling to Arizona, and she didn't mince words.
So here's what a second Trump term looks like. More bans, more suffering, and less freedom. It's 2024, not the 1800s. And we're not going back. We are not going back.
Calling Trump the architect of abortion bans, the former president has waffled on the issue.
I'm very pro-choice.
I'm pro-life. Even suggesting women should be punished.
There has to be some form of punishment.
And Trump proudly takes credit for appointing 3 conservative judges who helped overturn Roe v. Wade that made abortion legal for half a century.
Because we broke Roe v. Wade, and we did something that nobody thought was possible. We gave it back to the states.
Now Trump says Arizona went too far, urging lawmakers there to fix it fast.
Shame on you!
Knowing the abortion fallout could hurt Trump and the Republicans politically.
And now that they see it as a political albatross, they're all of a sudden trying to run away from it. They can't do that. They own this.
In an election year where voters aren't too thrilled with either candidate, Democrats are hoping abortion rights will drive voters to the polls in battleground states that they need to win, like Arizona. Heather?
Joy Malvin reporting from Washington. Turning now to a deadly crash in Texas, where authorities say a driver intentionally rammed a stolen semi-truck into a government building.
90-year-old female with blunt trauma came back from 18 wheeler in the building where she was sitting.
The driver plowed through the public safety office where people were waiting for driver's license services. At least 1 person was killed, 13 others injured. The suspect was arrested at the scene. Police say the 42-year-old was denied a commercial driving license at that location yesterday. Coming up, the Montreal heist that played out like a movie. A dramatic jewelry robbery with a possible link to international crime. Plus,
It's pretty cool. I've never walked along them before.
the unique attraction bringing people to New Brunswick for a leisure stroll. The former interpreter accused of stealing more than $16 million from baseball superstar Shohei Ohtani has surrendered to federal authorities. The 39-year-old allegedly stole the money from Ohtani's bank account to cover what prosecutors said was the interpreter's insatiable appetite for illegal sports betting. The judge ordered he have no contact with Ohtani and to receive treatment for a gambling addiction. To Montreal now, and a jewelry heist that unfolded like a movie plot. Thieves broke through walls of a mall to steal millions of dollars in jewelry. Investigators suspect links to international crime. CTV's Quebec Bureau Chief Jean-Pierre Beauchemin has more.
smashed ceiling and walls are evidence of the brazen heist robbers seemingly hid in the suburban Montreal mall.
Ils ont fait une tour ici.
And overnight they burst into a shop, spray painting the surveillance camera, cutting alarm system wires. Our products were thrown on the ground, says the store manager. There were bags everywhere. This was seemingly their entry point to the shop next door, a jewelry store they emptied. Police say they caught up to 10 suspects soon after they tried to escape in 3 cars. Investigators say 8 men and 2 women were arrested and face a range of charges including theft and conspiracy, that they were caught with jewelry and the store safe, a theft worth about $3 million. And what's more, police suspect they may be linked to crime tourism, to what they call South American theft groups. Members of those criminal gangs travel often posing as tourists to carry out illegal activities. The FBI issued a warning earlier this month saying these gangs have been striking for years and that victims' losses in the U.S. alone add up to tens of millions of dollars. And it says that these groups are active across the U.S. and have targeted other countries such as the UK, Canada, Australia, and more. In some cases, thieves send stolen goods to South America or liquidate stolen merchandise and send money overseas. The FBI says these groups are usually highly sophisticated and move around a lot, and the thefts in Montreal were certainly well organized. The store manager retraced their escape route, the holes through which they carried out the heavy safe, and out the back door of the mall. But this time, police say they stopped the robbers from getting away with millions. Geneviève Beauchemin, CTV News, Montreal.
So ahead tonight, a Newfoundland dentist learns his fate over an incident with an inmate. A shocking story out of Newfoundland has ended without any jail time. A dental surgeon let an untrained prison guard pull teeth from a sedated inmate. The peculiar case was settled at the province's Supreme Court. CTV's Garrett Berry reports.
Okay, go on. Sorry.
Dr. Louis Bourget said he was caught up in a teaching moment when, almost 4 years ago, he handed his surgery tools to a prison guard and instructed him on how to remove 4 teeth from a sedated inmate. The guard, along with a coworker, brought the inmate from a small, minimum security prison to a dental surgery office in Gander, in central Newfoundland. The guard took an interest in the procedure and stayed in the room while it started. According to a brief statement of facts between Bourget's lawyers and prosecutors, the surgeon then began actively teaching the guard. The guard's coworker started to film, all while those 4 teeth were removed. Bourget pleaded guilty to a charge of assault. The former inmate told the court he now suffers from anxiety and fears he could never go to a dentist again. Prosecutors wanted a 3-month prison sentence, but the judge in this case decided that wasn't necessary. She said the risk to reoffend was almost zero and explained the surgeon has already paid almost $1 million in legal fees and fines. Bourget has practiced in Newfoundland, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia. The judge said a criminal conviction would almost certainly end the surgeon's career. The victim in this case has also sued the provincial government, alleging they failed in their duty to keep him safe. That lawsuit is still in the courts. Garrett Berry, CTV News, St. John's.
One of the biggest names in broadcast journalism in the United States and a proud maritimer, Robert McNeil, has died.
Halifax remains the doorway to my imagination.
McNeil created the McNeil-Lehrer NewsHour on PBS in the 1970s and for decades was one of America's best-known TV news anchors. Born in Montreal and raised in Halifax, his journalism career took him from London to the U.S. He was in Dallas and on the scene of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in 1963. Robert McNeil was 93. After the break, llamas on the beach, the herd that has tourists trekking to New Brunswick. A New Brunswick business is bringing the farm to the woods and the beach, much to the delight of animal lovers. The special stroll involves a funky and fluffy 4-legged friend along the sandy shores. CTV's Sarah Plowman on the creative concept drawing in a sea of bookings.
Doug is the adventurer, Steve, the anxious guy who also rocks a mullet, Pearl is the lazy one. These llamas and alpacas love treats and earn extra snacks by walking.
That's pretty cool. I've never walked one before.
Many haven't, which is why tourists are willing to pay to lead a llama on a leisurely walk through the woods or along the beach at sunset. This group booked their excursion today. They're here in New Brunswick from Saskatchewan.
This is pretty great. Hello, Kevin. I think I've made a friend.
About 4 years ago, it dawned on Josie Gautreau that this could be a business. It happened when she took alpacas to the beach and others wanted to join. Business has been booming since.
I think it's just their little quirky faces. They're just so different.
Dave is affectionate and loves to be hugged.
People book hikes, birthday parties, and visits to seniors' homes. The experience can be therapeutic.
They don't judge you. They're very calm. You can cuddle them.
Gautreau's noticed businesses like hers are growing in popularity across the country. She plans to expand.
We'd like to get into doing like a llama campground, but I'd also like to get into overnight backpacking trips with the llamas. So we're building saddles right now for them to put backpacks on.
Another novel adventure for the curious, like Doug, who love to explore and make new friends along the way. Sarah Plowman, CTV News, Capillet, New Brunswick.
All right, it does look kind of fun. That's our show for this Friday. I'm Heather Butts for all of us at CTV National News. Thank you for watching. Todd Vanderhayden is sitting in for me tomorrow. I will be back on Sunday. Good night.
We invite you all to take a step forward.
Rwandan President Paul Kagame led a somber commemoration ceremony in the capital Kigali on Sunday on the 30th anniversary of the Rwandan genocide. Foreign visitors included the leaders of South Africa, Congo, Ethiopia, the Central African Republic and Tanzania, as well as Israeli President Isaac Herzog, whose country has been accused by South Africa of committing genocide in Gaza at the International Court of Justice. Kagame lit a flame of remembrance and laid a wreath at a memorial site holding the remains of 250,000 genocide victims. The killings began when a plane carrying then President Juvenal Habyarimana, a Hutu, was shot down over Kigali. The Tutsi rebels led by Kagame were blamed for downing the plane and killing the president.
This flame symbolizes not only our past, but the hope for tomorrow.
The Tutsi were then targeted by extremist Hutu in massacres that lasted over 100 days in 1994. Some moderate Hutus who tried to protect members of the Tutsi minority were also killed. The former head of Nigeria's central bank is expected to appear in a court in Lagos on Monday after fresh charges alleging misuse of office and corruption were filed against him by the anti-corruption agency on Friday. Godwin Emefiele is already facing procurement fraud charges in another court in the capital Abuja. He's denied the charges. On Friday, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission filed new charges against the embattled former central bank chief, including alleged fraudulent foreign exchange allocation of $2 billion, local media reported. The charge sheet claims that the allocation was done without supporting documents. Emefiele allegedly committed the offences between 2022 and 2023, the commission said. He was suspended last June by Nigeria's new president, Bola Tinubu, and placed in detention. Under Tinubu, Nigeria has reversed foreign exchange controls initiated by Emefiele and devalued the currency. Ivory Coast on Friday opened its largest mosque in the capital Abidjan. Funded by Morocco, the mosque took 7 years to build. This member of the congregation who came for the mosque's dedication said the facility is a sign of the deep ties between Ivorians and Moroccans. It is an important work of His Majesty the King of Morocco. It is an act of generosity, of faith, but also an act of deep love for the Ivory Coast, the Ivorian people. Muslims make up around 40% of the population in Ivory Coast. Morocco's envoy to Abidjan, who was present at the ceremony, said relations between his country and Ivory Coast remain cordial and warm. Relations between Ivory Coast and Morocco date back 60 years. We have always worked together in different areas: political, economic, social, religious, sport and security. Today this collaboration is going well, and we have great hope that it will continue for the future with works like this one, with efforts on both sides. Morocco invests heavily across Francophone West Africa, and its presence in Ivory Coast is remarkable.
Thank you for watching and privilege of your time. This is Amir Shakil 5858. I am Amir Woodman. Have a good life.